Hearty shalom to you, Jeffrey Seif here. Looking in Acts chapter 25, I want to look at verses 9 through 12. This is really the follow-up to a little portion of the literature that I began to look at last week. Actually, I'm doing them both back-to-back. Usually I space them out a week at a time, but as you're watching this video, I'm in Israel, and I'm there ministering, and so I wanted to get these to you from my home office. As you might recall from last week, Paul is on trial before Festus, and he makes a very telling statement in verse 8 in chapter 25 of Acts, saying, listen, I haven't done anything against the Jewish people. I just haven't. And Paul is giving his perspective. Festus, we're told in verse 9, wanted to do the Jewish leaders a favor. And he said to Paul, are you willing to go to Jerusalem to be tried before me? In other words, are you willing to go there? Now, what's interesting and what's tragic, by the way, is Paul pivots away from that. He says, listen, I'm standing before you here and now. I'm standing before Caesar's judgment seat, where I ought to be tried. I've done nothing to the Judeans, as you very well know, in verse 10. I have not wronged them, you know that. I'm not anxious to make my way to Jerusalem to get a trial there, because I'm not going to get a fair trial there. And that, to me, is very, very telling, and it's very, very sad. He says, if there's nothing to their charges, no one can turn me over to them. And he says, I appeal to Caesar. And this is tragic, by the way. That is to say, I'm not going to get a fair treatment there. And that's where you should get a fair treatment, because, you know, if you look at the Torah scholars, the judges there, you know, ought to be judging with biblical righteousness in mind, but instead they're intoxicated by their own jealousies and angers and all these tensions, and ostensibly it can look like a fair trial, but it's all pretense. At the end of the day, Paul knows what's really driving things, and he's not going to get a fair shake from those people. They're not going to look at him with a tabula rasa, with a blank slate, and let the evidence just impose itself on the mind to get a judgment for innocent or guilty. He's guilty before he gets there, and he knows it. He's guilty of nothing, really, but the point is he has to say, no, listen, I'm not going to go to you. I need to go out there. And so he appeals to Caesar. And in a way, there's a tragedy in there, but there's a triumph in that as well. That is to say that his appeal to Rome then is going to set in motion his making his way to Rome, and there's more ministry that awaits him there. You know, he's been languishing, you know, in a dungeon for quite some time with this trumped up nonsense that began in Jerusalem because of the jealousy and the anger and the tensions and so forth of Jewish religious leaders there. He's been languishing in Caesarea. He's going through a number of administrators, a lot of conversations. It's not going anywhere. Festus, who wants to placate, you know, he's a governor and he wants to placate the powerful people. He says, are you willing to go there? Well, Luke's already made it clear there's a plot to kill him on the way. And it's not that Paul's afraid of death, but he's just not ready for it yet. He's got more spring in his step. I say that, by the way, you know, I'm 63 and a half. I'm staring down 64, but I still got a little spark left in me, and I'm not ready to give up the ghost and take up knitting. And Paul, similarly, there's more work to be done, and he's minded to press on toward it, but he realizes that it's a dead-end street to go there, back to Jerusalem. And so he makes his appeal to Rome. He's going to go to Rome. There's going to be a precarious journey there. He's going to languish in Rome for a while. Arguably, he's going to get loose from that, and there's more ministry to come. Eventually, he's going to make his end at Rome. But the point is that, and the point that I want to underscore here is that Paul says, listen, I appeal to Caesar. I mentioned, again, that that's rather sad. One would hope you can get a fair hearing from your own people, from your own tribunal, from your own, you know, whatever juridical apparatus is there, but he knows he's not going to get a fair hearing, so he takes it where he can get one. That's what he's looking for. Let's make sure, as I pivot away from this, we're going to do this short this morning, I'm filming it in the morning. I'm going to get picked up in a little bit and head to the airport with my wife, Barry, heading to Israel. Let's make sure that we give people in circumstance a fair shake, so that people have to say, no, listen, I don't want to deal. I hope people won't say, I don't want to deal with Jeffrey Seif. I'd rather deal with someone else, because that Jeffrey, his perspective is jaded. He's not going to, I'm already guilty in his eyes, and he's got his perspective, and he's really not going to hear me out in a way that's fair. We don't want to be that way. We want to be able to treat people fairly, justly, and equitably, and not be like those that have already pronounced judgment on Paul for reasons of their own. I mention that because, as we make our journey through life, that it's not at all impossible for us to develop. We get angry at people, we feel offended, we've already interpreted situation, circumstance, and motive and the like, and we don't always, even when we're listening to people, we're not really listening. Sometimes if we listen deeply, there are things that ameliorate, that improve the situation. They help us to perceive the person in a new light. Instead of looking at things from our perspective, which of course we can't help to do, we're wanting to understand things from their perspective. In the Torah, judges are beckoned to inquire diligently, to seek justice. And by the way, to be righteous, to be a tzaddik, a pious person, is to be just in the way that we deal with people, to be gracious, fair, and square. And it's tragic to me that Paul can't get a fair and square hearing with those people. Let's not be like those people where we can't give people a fair hearing. Let's be just, equitable, and good in the way that we look at all people and circumstance. God bless. Jeffrey Seif, signing out.